At this time in our country, considerations for the estimates of Budget 2014 are ongoing in the National Assembly. Many Guyanese, if not all, are anxious as to what will be the final outcome at the end of this process. This anxiety is premised on the opposition using its combined one-seat majority in the House to cut the budgetary allocations for various agencies, programs, and projects in 2012 and 2013. To give his views on the recently concluded budget debate, his expectations at the end of the process, and related issues is His Excellency President Donald Ramotar. Mr. President, thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule. The budget debate is over and the deliberations on the estimates are ongoing. First of all, what's your take on how the budget debate went?
I think it went very well from our point of view, from the government side point of view. The PPP civic members of parliament, I think all of them, both the front benchers, the ministers, and the backbenchers did extremely well, and I think they have given a complete picture of the work in the various sectors of the economy. All of their speeches were full of content, a lot of information that that they have provided to the nation as a whole, to the opposition, to everyone, and from that point of view, I think they have done exceptionally well. It shows that our government ministers are very, very competent. It shows that our members of parliament are working hard on the ground and that they have their feet firmly planted on the soil. They know what is happening and they were able to provide a lot of information. On the other hand, I think the opposition had a difficult task, I believe, because it was a very good budget. And they would have been finding it very hard to attack such a very good budget, which had, in my view, something for every sector, every class within our society. And so they had a very difficult task, and they generated into a lot of personal attacks and throwing nasty remarks and so on and so forth. So I think it was generally a very good debate, and it was also important because of the content. I think anyone who looked at the television would have learned an enormous amount from the presentations, particularly from the PPP civic side, how well and how informed and how much work the government is doing within the society.
Based on how you describe the opposition's presentations, is this in any way an indication of what was said earlier, that a bloody and nasty war would have been promised during this period?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that they just found it very difficult to criticize what I think was, I mean, we did a lot of work on the budget, which was a very thoughtful, all the measures were carefully thought out, and all the impact on the various sectors of the society were carefully thought out. So I think the quality of the budget made it difficult for them, because they are not in a mode to debate and to try to give credence. I mean, I know some of them did make some positive comments, but you know, it was few and far apart. And the quality of the budget itself was maybe put them on the back foot, and because they feel that they have to oppose, and sometimes for opposition's sake, and not in a very objective way, they didn't make any great amount of suggestions. So I think that's why they degenerated into some level of abuse.
Many things were said, sir, among them being the opposition leader, Mr. David Granger, claims that Guyana's economic prosperity is driven by narco trade, and if this is to continue, Guyana would become a narco-state. What's your view on that comment?
Well, I think that that is a big insult to all the people of our country who are working extremely hard in order to promote and develop themselves as individuals, and in the process developing our country. And these are general statements that they have been making without making any argument to substantiate any of them. I would like him to point out in any one of the line items, where is it that the drug money is that is driving any of these things. What I can point out to him is the investment that our people have been making. For instance, rice farmers and the rice industry, or farmers in their own land preparation and so forth, they invest about $28 billion in the economy, the rice farmers alone. And this is he calling rice farmers drug people? They buy tractors and other equipment for agriculture, and they spend about another $2 billion on that. The millers in upgrading their mills and preparing the mills for the bigger and bigger crops that we've been having, they spend about $10 billion a year. So the rice industry alone, there's an investment of about $40 billion in the industry. Do you call that, is that narco money? Where is the narco money in that? For instance, sugar workers, the wages that sugar workers receive, the unionized workers I'm speaking about the Gau and Nasi category of workers in the sugar industry. Their wage bill is about $20 billion a year. That is a huge investment within the economy that they have there. Is Mr. Granger and the opposition calling them drug people? Tourism, for instance, which is a growing sector. Tourists, they are in the providers of these facilities in tourism have been investing in the infrastructure. They spent about $35 billion last year into the industry itself. Is Mr. Granger and the opposition calling them drug traffickers? The private housing, people who build their individual houses, people who have their own individual houses and build their houses, in all it's about $50 billion gone into that. And these are people who have been mortgaging things, going to the banks. The banks themselves would not have given them a loan if they thought that they were drug traffickers. $50 billion these people invest in making their own homes to try to promote a better quality of life. Are these people, is this the category of people who they're talking about that are drug traffickers? And the private housing developers, they spend about another $100 billion in developing housing schemes, more upper end type of housing and so forth. This is where the investment. What about the gold? People make sacrifices to go into the interior. They leave their families on the coast to go and work in the interior. Last year alone, they provided about $120 billion to this economy. Where is the drugs in all of this? This is why I think it's a major insult to a lot of the hard-working people. Added to that, central government wage bill is about $38 billion a year. $38 billion that government workers get, that they spend within the economy. Government pensions, it's about $6.5 billion last year. Old age pensions and public assistance, about $8 billion. How could they talk about drugs fueling this economy? This is clearly an attempt on the part of the opposition to try to besmirch the good name of our country, to attack the good name of our country, to try to prevent foreign investors, to create a bad image of Guyana. Without any facts, they keep repeating all of these type of things. The private, if you look at the banks, the banks giving credit to the private sector, it was $185 billion given to the private sector. All of that invested into this economy. How can they make such a? I mean, I'm very worked up about that statement, which is besmirching almost all the people of our country who have been working and sacrificing to develop themselves and to promote themselves and promote our country's development. Our foreign direct investment last year was about $214 million US, which is about $43 billion again, more than $43 billion. And our remittances was about 328 million United States dollars, which is about more over in 60-something billion, 66 billion US dollars at least, Guyana dollars in the economy as well. So I think that the opposition in general and the leader of the opposition in particular needs to apologize to the people of the country for the statement that he has made. He has pointed to nothing. If he, let him point to which building or which business he knows that is narco-driven in this country. What I know is what I'm telling you here about the investment in our society. So I really find that very obnoxious and a very and a total lack of appreciation for the efforts of the hard-working people of this country.
Is there any mechanism as head of state that you probably can ask him to withdraw that statement?
Well, I think he should, because as I've said, he has provided absolutely no backup to his argument. Absolutely no backup to his argument. And I think decency should demand that he apologize to all of these hard-working people of our country.
In addition to that, the opposition is also saying that they want to see development with a human face, and that 2014 budget is deficient in this regard. But clearly, sir, there are numerous measures there in that budget.
Clearly, of course, as I said, there seems to have been opposing for opposition's sake. How can you say that giving $10,000 to students to get to school and to attend school more regularly is not a human face? Which added to, we have already been giving school books to our children. We have already been giving school uniforms to our children. In some places we provide 3 meals a day, like in the interior where they have dormitories for them. We have all of that we have been providing for our children. How could you say that that's not a human face? What about health? Look at our health services. How could you say a specialty hospital to try to give the vast majority of people services at a more affordable rate, to have them at a more affordable rate? How is that not a budget with a human face? Look at all our social programs. How is the pension that we're giving, which when we got into the government was about $300, and you had to have a means test before you could have been qualified for that. Now it's $13,125, and that's just the pension. Plus, apart from the general subsidy that we give to the whole country for the electricity, we give extra to old age pensioners, the $30,000 that we give as to subsidize their electricity charges. We also give subsidy for water in these areas. How could you describe this as not being a budget with a human face? You obviously, either you haven't read the budget, or you have read it and didn't understand it, or just being malicious, or just opposing for opposition's sake.
I recall some of what Agriculture Minister Dr. Leslie Ramsamy said in his presentation, and he said basically if you listen to the debate in Parliament, you get the distinct impression that there are 2 different countries that are being talked about. One that the opposition is saying about, and one that the government is talking about. Clearly, based on what you said, that observation by Dr. Ramsamy seemed to be coming true.
The difference, though, is that the presentation on the government side were all backed up with a lot of facts. A lot of figures, all of which could be verified, all the verifiable stuff. There hasn't been much in the terms of verification on the part of what the opposition has been saying.
All right, let's go to, pardon me, the opposition. There are indications by speakers in the opposition that some areas in the budget would not be supported. There was also an indication that if an acceptable explanation is given, that the possibility of support is open. Other areas may not necessarily find it that easy. The $6 billion subsidy to Gaisuku was in many ways threatened, but in many ways we would want to believe they were forced to abandon their intention to cut that. That has now been passed. How impacting are these threats on your optimism for the passage of the budget as a whole? Well,
I am optimistic because you know that they had signaled long ago that they would have cut the money that the government was giving to the sugar industry, and the sugar workers, of course, came out and they recognized the seriousness of this situation, and they retreated on trying to cut the money for the sugar industry. However, We have always been giving, since we have been in government, throughout the PPP Civic being in government. I don't think that there's any questions that the opposition posed to the government that has been left unanswered. And in this last parliament for sure, I don't think you will find any questions that they have posed that have been left unanswered. And our people, our ministers are ready and willing to give exhaustive answers to their questions. So if they stick to what they have said, but we know that they have a habit of not always sticking to what they say, but if they stick to what they say, that if they are given proper answers to their question, then I am optimistic that reason will prevail. Because what will they cut? I don't see that there's anything there that merits being cut in the budget, because all of them either contribute to the economic development of the country or it passes on substantial social benefits to the population. So I think that hopefully that other people will express their views as the sugar workers express themselves, that other sectors of the society will express their views and let the opposition understand clearly that all of us should have one goal, and that is of developing our country.
If I can stay a little bit on sugar, sir, how important is it to continue to provide assistance to Gaisuku in the face of the challenges it is currently experiencing?
Well, I think it's extremely important. When you take into consideration that Gaisuku employs about 16,000 people directly, and all of these people will have families, and therefore probably people who directly depend on the sugar industry. It's about 80,000 people would, if you average that a family of 4 and each one of these workers will have a family, it's about 80,000 people will directly depend on the sugar industry. Moreover, if you look at the various communities, they depend a lot, their fortune depends a lot on the sugar industry. Moreover, I think the sugar industry, it has to be understood because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about what is the real nature of some of the problems within the sugar industry. The real problem actually began when the price of sugar was cut. When the protocol, when the sugar protocol was abandoned in Europe, and the price of sugar in 2010 was cut by 36%. That's a huge cut in revenues for any company, a 36% cut. The industry obviously has to make a lot of adjustments at this point in time. They were anticipating some of these things. That is why the investment was made at Skeldon for the industry to modernize and make new factories and so on. The Skeldon factory did not perform as well as was expected, or has not yet performed as well as expected. This crop, because of the amount of work we're doing to correct the deficiencies, this crop has been showing far better signs, and therefore I'm very encouraged that the Skeldon factory will become the flagship factory of the industry very soon as those problems are fixed. And I must point out to you that it was Booker Tate who was in charge of the construction, of the management that we had there in charge of the construction, and they are in court now. Right now, Gaisuku has taken them to court on the same issue of the Skeldon factory. So since it's matter in court, I wouldn't want to elaborate more on that, just to say that Gaisuku has taken them to court on this issue. This is the same Booker Tate that the PNC had brought into the industry, by the way, to manage the industry. So, and the other problems in the industry, it is very clear we talk about climate change, but in the sugar industry, you see it in a real way, in the loss of opportunity days to do a lot of work in the field. I am told that when, let's say up to the beginning of this century, when you had about 120 opportunity days to do all your field operation, that has been reduced to now about 80 days or so because of the uneven rainfall pattern. And therefore, Gaisuco has to expend a lot of money to readjust. Apart from that, they turn out because a lot of people are now having other employment opportunities in the mining sector, in the construction sector. All of these sectors are growing. And that is impacting on the labor supply to Gaisuco. The average turnout across the industry is about 65%. In some estates, like at the West Demerara estate, it is as low as 43%. So it's very clear that more and more, in order to supplement the shortage of labor, that we have to depend more and more on mechanical harvesting and mechanical planting and these type of things that has to be done. So it calls for a lot of investment. But sugar itself, in my view, still has a very bright future and will continue to make the sterling contribution that it has made to the development of our country.
I note the point you made on climate change, and I heard that being given as a response to one of the questions yesterday by the Honorable Minister of Agriculture.
Okay.
But in rebuttal, a senior member of the opposition said that sugar has been planted for over 2 centuries, and weather was never and is never a factor.
No, I think that person obviously would have been talking from not with the knowledge of the sugar industry. That person, whoever made such a statement, obviously is not intimately familiar with the works of the sugar industry, because it is true that we have been planting sugar for 300 and more years in this country. But it's also true that we had much longer opportunity days. We didn't have the question of the climate change as it has forced itself upon us over this, and it has been accelerating. All the science is telling you that this thing is happening. So even if we were carrying out the work, we can't do the same thing that we did 300 years ago. Obviously, with times have changed, technology has changed and so forth, and therefore people are moving on in some ways in different type of profession and direction. So therefore, we have real problems. These are real problems that we face, and we have to find real solutions to these problems.
So if I can take you back to what the opposition leader said in addition, he said that basically there's nothing in the budget and the national interest, and that national interest will guide cuts to it. You and your government have reiterated that it is because of national interest the budget is crafted the way it is. Is this a difference of understanding of what national interest is?
Well, if he holds to his view of a national interest, then I expect that there will be no cuts, because everything in the budget was carefully thought out to ensure that they make a contribution, as I mentioned earlier, to the further development of the economy and to the social well-being of the people as a whole. So if he holds to his view and everything will be done in the national interest, then I don't expect that they will cut.
The Speaker of the National Assembly presented his guidelines on how he believes the considerations of the estimate should proceed. He also noted his interpretation of the Honorable Chief Justice's ruling with regards to budget cuts. May I ask, sir, what's your understanding of what the Speaker said and whether you find it agreeable?
Well, I think the one fundamental point, I mean, I'm not a lawyer in this. I'm not a lawyer by training. Of course, I'm forced to read a lot of the laws being president of the country. But one of the fundamental things that I think that should be taken into account is that the Parliament itself was set up by the Constitution. The Parliament was set up by the Constitution, and the whole system of governance and government is being run by constitutional laws. We have a constitution in there. So the Chief Justice's ruling was that some of the position that the Parliament was taking was unconstitutional. And I agree, and of course the Chief Justice is the qualified person to pronounce on these things. And I think that the Chief Justice is far more competent to pronounce on that than the Speaker of the National Assembly. So I would say that the Speaker of the National Assembly is wrong on some of these issues, and the Chief Justice is completely right.
If I can go back then also, there are indications that some areas will be cut. Let's say, for example, Gene and NCN seem to be making the top of the list where that is concerned. There are some indications that the 3.7 billion subsidy to GPL may come under some scrutiny. What you think will be the scenario if this were to be, if these were to be cut in the face of the Chief Justice's ruling?
Well, I would say I think they will be violating the Chief Justice ruling if they go in that direction. But however, again, I think it is a bit of a contradictory position they're taking. They're saying that they will cut in the national interest. But how would these cuts that they're proposing be in the national interest? A lot of the subsidies to the GPL is being done to ensure that people's light bill do not go up. So the government is taking off a lot of pressure on that. And they're saying that budget with a human face. How is this not a human face in this regard? And the cutting of Gina, I think that's probably pure vindictiveness, because I understand, I saw it reported in the press that one APNU MP was given an interview on NCN, and they almost dragged him off the television set, which contradicts to what they're saying. I know that NCN has been calling on them all the time to come participate in debates and discussion. I remember that shortly after the 2011 election in 2012, there was this 7-part debate on corruption, and the APNU turned up for one of those debates and then disappeared. They didn't come back for any of those debates. So I think that would be sheer vindictiveness, and it got to be pure vindictiveness on the part of Gina as well, because the role of Gina is totally different from what they're trying to talk about. Gina is supposed to be giving out information from the government. So I think that they are actually trying to muzzle the government with these things.
Cuts have implications for the country here and abroad. What more can you do differently, if anything at all, to have the opposition understand these implications so development would not be stymied?
I don't think that it's lack of understanding on their part. I mean, after all, they have capable people on their side as well. So we can't put it to a lack of understanding on their part. It's just, it's just that they have been completely uncooperative. They have not been supporting many of the powerful developmental projects that we had. You know, if we had started to build the Amila Falls by the end of last year, what a big injection that would have been into the economy. Our growth would have been far more than 5%. Our estimated growth this year, if we had started the construction, would have been far more than 5% in that just one project alone. And so I don't think it's a lack of understanding on their part. They seems to be determined to try to attack the economy. I mean, how else do you explain? I mean, I know that this is not the question you asked, but how do you explain their attitude to the AML bill, the anti-money laundering bill, which everyone knows can have an impact on our economy? So we are forging. If we had a little cooperation from the opposition, like not blocking some of these important developmental projects, our country can move much faster than it is. And I don't know if they think that this is bringing them any political benefit, but I'm sure that the Guyanese people are looking on at what is happening. And I personally have every faith in the collective intelligence of the Guyanese people.
The opposition has said over and over again that they were not given an opportunity to be able to present their requirements for the budget. Is there anything so that you can share that to say what is it that they're asking for that they want to have in the budget?
My impression very clear. You remember from the very beginning of my term in office, they had made a statement that they want to be writing the budget or something to the effect, and I had made the statement very clearly that that's a function of the executive to do. But I have absolutely no problem in having wide and in-depth consultation with them. And that is the same position that we have. As far as I know, I had instructed Ashley Singh to consult with them, to call them in for meeting, and I know that he did. And I think in his presentation in Parliament, he probably revealed the amount of times and the emails that he had sent to try to get consultation going. Myself and the opposition leader, in one of the conversations that we've had, I had even mentioned to him that the consultation could be broader than just the shadow Minister of Finance and the Minister of Finance, but we could be the shadow ministers on his side, meeting and consulting and discussing and helping to influence the policy from the ministers on our side. So all of that we have we spoke about. And I was at the TAG presentation dinner, I think it was last Friday night they had it. And I heard the president of TAG in his speech saying that he had a 3-hour consultation. The TAG had a 3-hour consultation with the Minister of Finance on the budget, on budget issues. I know that the Minister of Finance met the private sector, the labor movement, and generally other social movements within the country. So very clearly there's no reluctance on our side to consult. We are ready to consult because we always think that we don't claim to have all the knowledge in the world, and we believe that consultation can help and can be better for everyone in the country. But it's very clearly there's a big reluctance on the side of the opposition to consult. I suspect that if they do consult, they might find it more hard to cut, to have an excuse to cut the budget, and there seems to want to demonstrate their ability to want to cut the budget. Is it too late for 2014 if they were to say tomorrow that we want to be part of this process? Is it too late? Well, we're now in the estimates. So it's too late. I mean, since last year we were, but they're still discussing. I mean, I'm sure if they put up anything that is reasonable. But if you want to tell me that they'll put up to cut the specialty hospital, which, as I mentioned to you just now, is designed to be two things. One, to provide a service and to make affordable services that many people in this country at this point in time cannot afford, like bypass operations and cancer treatment and dialysis and kidneys and so forth, some of these more complicated type of issues. And it's also designed to serve as a revenue stream because we have a huge diaspora outside. We can develop a new stream of health tourism because other people can come here to use these facilities. Already, I don't know if you know, but a lot of people, Guyanese, come back to Guyana to have dental services. So if we can broaden that, like India, for instance, has made it a huge success in having health tourism. And some other countries are thinking in the same direction. So I think that how then can we say if they propose a cut of the hospital that is a good thing? Obviously, we would not agree with that because we think that will be. I mean, all of us. This doesn't. To me, I find it baffling that they want to cut. I don't know if there's any special interest with any private hospital that is lobbying these people, but it is very clear to me that that the whole intention is try to get more services, and we are all human beings. It doesn't matter what political party we believe. It doesn't matter what religion we worship at or what shrine we worship at. All of us are subject to get sick, and that necessity to have something like that in our country, I think it's fantastic. And to try to cut something like that, to me, it blows my mind. I can't imagine. Mr. President, if I can just indulge you in a few more minutes of your time. The government side has said that it is easy for the opposition to say increase many of the measures in the budget, given the fact that the opposition would not be held accountable. Clearly, if expenses are increased and there isn't enough of revenue to offset that, then it can lead to serious financial implications for the country.
Is this message by the opposition an attempt to infuse a sense of false expectations in the minds of their supporters and other Guyanese?
Well, it could be. It could be that it could very well be that that is part of their intention, or to try to create the impression that in some areas more could be done. But as I said, their actions contradict a lot with their words, because if, as you mentioned, you think that they might want to cut the hospital, or let's say they want to cut the airport project. I mean, these are projects, the hospital project, it's, I don't know what was happening in their heads, because, you know, they voted for these projects before. Okay. And now the government has gone into contractual arrangements and many other things. Establish all kind of contractual arrangements, paid advance, big money in advance to start to do this work. And now they're coming a year, 2 years later, wanting to cut the budget for these things. So obviously, their words and deeds are pretty far apart.
Following 2 years of cuts to the budget and strong indications of this probably continuing in 2014, there's a sense of worry among the Guyanese public. What can you tell the people who are looking at you so that they can remain optimistic?
Well, I think take a good example from the sugar workers. They turned out to defend their interests yesterday, and everyone was expecting that the assistance the government was giving to the sugar industry would have been cut. But we see that the expression by the sugar workers about the importance of the sugar industry and what it means obviously won the day. So I think other sectors of the society that will benefit from many of the measures that we are taking, and that's a large cross-section of the people. GPL, the government is spending a lot of money to subsidize. If you cut that, it's a big issue. If you cut if you cut the airport, it's going to affect your tourism development, or what we see in the future for tourism. So I think people must also make their voices heard. And to let the opposition know that these things are essential for the social and economic development of the country, and it should not be stymied by narrow political agendas.
I've noticed a number of young people, including school children, visiting the public gallery in the National Assembly to observe aspects of the budget debate. The way some matters were treated and discussed by the opposition, I'm clear in my mind, sir, it would not necessarily aid in inspiring our young people who are the leaders of tomorrow.
Well, I don't know. But I think that generally the parliament in the area have a lot of cut and thrust and debates and so forth. And it's good that our young children could see these things, that they're growing up in a real world, and to see how these things operate. I agree it would have been better, of course, if we had some of the debates more civil, for want of a better word. But that's how Parliament is. And
finally, sir, how challenging is all of this for you personally?
Well, it is, of course, worrying. Worrying that because, you know, we have constantly been working very hard to try to be inclusive, to try to tackle some of the real issues and problems that we face. As I mentioned at the very early part of our interview, there's a lot of programs that are being affected that could have pushed our economic growth much, much farther if they had been allowed to come into existence and help promote and encourage. I think Minister Irfan Ali did a good job in pointing out the multiply effects that some of these investment will have in the economy. So it is worrying, but of course I didn't expect to have a picnic when I came into the job, so I think it's part of the territory.
Mr. President, I want to thank you very much and wish you all the best. His Excellency President Donald Ramotar, Niasuban, thanking you for watching.